rehearsal of the first one was recorded on April 19th, 2020.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Council of First Ones. I'm your host, Kelly. Joining me today is my good friend, Renee. How are you doing, Renee?
Oh, I'm fine. I'm isolated. I'm good.
Aren't we all isolated? We also have Rex joining us. Hi, Rex.
Hi, Kelly. Great to be here today.
How are you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you doing, Kelly?
Very good. We also have David joining us.
Hello. Yeah, great to be part of this and calling from Seattle.
And we also have Sean joining us today.
Geeking out from quarantine, yeah. This is the most lively I get all week, so.
And today we have two very special guests, the Taylors, Rebecca and Mark, joining us. Hey, Rebecca. How are you doing?
How you doing?
I'm doing great. And how is Mark doing?
I'm doing really well. Not doing much. I've always done that well. Not doing much. I do very well.
Well, thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me.
One thing I want to get out of this is that I am very excited to have Mark and Rebecca Taylor here because these are the founders. You know, I don't think for the people who are not aware or they haven't been to PowerCon and haven't picked up the books and any of that. And I want to make clear to our listeners that Mark and Rebecca Taylor are basically the mother and father of Masters of the Universe. We'll get into how they created this phenomenon and fandom that we love so much. But our usual questions is always leading to the both of you, since you both were involved in this. And we like to find out, like, how did you get into the toy industry? So hearing it from the two sides, how did you two get started?
We would like to apologize for the audio for the next few minutes. The internet was a little spotty at this point, but it does clear up in a little while. So thank you for your patience.
I got started in the toy industry before I even knew I was started, before I ever met Rebecca. Way back when I was a youngster, I would say about somewhere around 1953, I started drawing my hero. And he had lots of names, and he took lots of forms. He was somewhere between a caveman and a knight. I drew and drew. And I'd make up these stories as I went because it was better than real life for me. And I think most storytellers, that's true with them. Now, Rebecca and I got together much later in our careers. So I'll start off a little bit by going through mine real quickly. It was thanks to my parents forbade me to draw. So I sold pencils and paper because you can't stop a kid from doing anything. And I had a very nice drawing instructor, mechanical drawing instructor, and he encouraged me a great deal. So I spent a lot of time working at carnivals, setting pins, you name it, I did it, because life at home was much better if I worked than if I didn't. I went to junior college after that, and I took drafting classes through all of this. It was the one consistent thing that I always really liked to do. So but the story was already starting to evolve. I wanted a hero that would always try to do the right thing. I was a Boy Scout, and I loved it. And I couldn't understand why the world wasn't a little more like the Scouts. And so after I went to junior college, at El Camino Junior College, I got a job working for Air Research. I worked on the Gemini, Mercury, and Apollo space. The reason they hired me was largely because of my drafting skills. But I couldn't help it. I started putting the whole space thing into my character. And so he would go to outer space I read books by Burroughs, by Wells, by you name it. I was an avid reader, and I would fold these into my story of this hero. The hero never really changed as far as his ethics go. He was always all about protect the innocent and pull down the bullies when possible. And not a lot of, believe it or not a lot of killing. It was always better to kind of embarrass him than to kill him. And but I was a big fan of EC Comics and Mad Magazine. I wanted to draw like all those guys. They were phenomenal. The subject matter was just fine with me, but a lot of people looked down on them. Then after I had worked in their research, then I went to the Navy right after Art Center. Sorry, I went to Art Center and graduated from Art Center, and I wanted to be the best drawer at Art Center. I never really achieved that because I was at school with some phenomenal artists, but I wanted to be the very best. And at the end of Art Center, the Navy picked me up instead of just letting me be drafted to go to Vietnam. The Navy picked me up and they put me in the Naval Undersea Warfare Center.
Yeah.
I worked on a lot of projects that were highly classified, and I worked on some of them that everybody knows about, like Sea Lab 1, Sea Lab 2. I worked on the curve that retrieved the hydrogen bomb off Spain when we lost one over there. I worked on all kinds of projects. I was actually with the Navy for about 8 years.
They called you
A combat illustrator. That was the only thing they can imagine. And they used my skills fully. And I was very appreciated, and I was treated very well by the Navy. I worked for a wonderful guy, and they were just so nice to me. Now, towards the end, when I said I wanted to resign, I think they were worried about my ability to make a living on the outside because I was constantly drawing this really weird stuff. And
You mean your fantasy stuff?
yeah, my fantasy stuff.
Oh.
That was always the best stuff. And they suggested that the Navy would put me through my master's and get my master's for me, and they would pay everything. And I mean, pay everything: parking, supplies, salary. It was a phenomenal job. Leave it to me to fall into that. But I went to Cal State to do my master's, and that's where I met Rebecca. I met her in a classroom. I walked in the classroom.
Oh, no, don't tell this part, please. So I looked across the room and there's this guy and he's got this really goofy look on his face. And he's looking at me. He's got really long hair. Oh, that's the part he didn't tell you. He looked like he had really long hair, and the Navy still kept him like that.
Wow.
But this guy was looking at me really weird, and that's Mark.
Yeah, and so I was struck. I was one of those people you hear about once in a while, or maybe you see a movie about it. But I wanted that woman, and no matter what I had to do, I was going to get her, and I did. And she's managed to stay with me. I don't know why, but she has. And it turns out she's a pretty damn good artist herself. And so since then, we've kind of worked in conjunction. We worked with each other.
So we started a studio together, and then what happened was when we had this studio, we were doing work for Disney and people like that. And then a Mattel job came in, and it was to design a little sewing machine for little girls.
So perfect.
And so he did the sewing machine, and I did all the stuff that you could make with it. And when he took it in, they hired him right then. They just said, "Do you want to work here?" I think I'm going to tell the story here. I think it was for like $17,000, right?
I don't know, but
So that was big. I suppose to us it was because we're struggling. So he starts at Mattel, he's doing Barbie stuff. You can go on here, Mark.
Yeah, and they hired me as a package designer. That's what they needed, and that's what they thought they wanted. But from the time they hired me, I really worked on product. I worked on Superstar Barbie Bus. I worked on the camper. I worked on a lot of the girls' stuff because, frankly, I was willing to work with anybody. It never bothers me to work with people. And they were glad to have somebody that could draw because, frankly, they didn't have a whole lot of people that could draw. They were good designers. They could pick stuff really well, but they really weren't what I call creative draftsmen. That means somebody who you say, draw something that looks something like this, and we'll see what we can do with it. And then they'd take my drawings and they could make it into anything. But that's what I was good at. In fact, when they hired me at the Navy, one of the first things they asked me was, can you draw something from scratch with no Photoshop or no, in those days, no photographs? And I said, sure. And they tried me out and I could. And since then, that's kind of how I've made my living. Later, much later, at Mattel, I was still considered a package designer. They have me down there to this day as a package designer, but I was no longer designing packages. They started using me to do test markets. I did test markets for Conan, for spacemen, for military guys, you name it. And I would draw up a presentation and people would come and look at it and they would show it to kids. And none of them worked until I did Conan. And then, wow. Then the Mattel had kind of an arrangement with the Conan people that if they could do Conan as a PG, get that one pretty good.
Since you stumbled upon one of the big mysteries of Conan and Mattel, what exactly got done with the Conan line?
I did all the Conan stuff.
Yeah,
and
but
I did drawings of Barbarian, and I loved it. I jumped into it with both feet. I mean,
that whole thing.
yeah, Mattel had made a deal with the people that were doing Conan, and it was De Laurentiis, it was some big people, and they made a deal. And then when they backed out of the deal, Mattel backed out because they said because Conan was a PG, but the truth is parental guidance needed. Yeah,
the movie rating.
Mattel backed out because we had done some testing, very preliminary testing, and the He-Man, the Barbarian stuff was doing so well, but most of it really wasn't Conan. Most of it was stuff I'd made up from this past I told you about, of reading all these classics and continuously drawing. A lot of the drawings were drawings I'd done way before I ever went to Mattel. And so I continued to work on it, and I met one of the best sculptors I ever met in my life. His name was Tony Guerrero, and we were old buddies because he was a friend of my father-in-law's. They'd both grown up in East Los Angeles, in the barrio there. And my father-in-law was a real good buddy of his. When he found that out, we got to be real tight. But he was also very, very talented. And he could take the stuff I would do in what they call a B sheet, which is a product description. And I would do the B sheets, and then he would do the sculpting on it. And the marketing people kind of run along behind. They were nice. One of them was a new guy named Mark Ellis. And so he didn't get in the way too much. And so we put together a presentation. And first it was shown to presentation. No, now they junked Conan because they never explained it to me, but they didn't want to do it.
Just out of curiosity, do you guys, because the Conan, Mattel always kind of kept quiet about it. And so any information, because of the lawsuit. So you did drawings, but was there, just to clarify, did you do drawings based on the comic book Conan or the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie?
I read the books.
Yeah.
The books that way before the movie. And so I did this way before there was any comic books. There was paperback books, and I used to love them. But they were Conan, and I would make my own character. It was kind of, I was hoping he could kick Conan's ass, frankly. And so I designed him that way because I wanted to put my own code of ethics to him. Conan was a thug compared to the guy I imagined. I imagined a guy who always was on the side of the downtrodden, of the innocent. So, but everybody was starting to really gravitate towards my drawings, which was really for the test. And Ray Wagner, the president of Mattel, was the only man farsighted enough to jump on it and say, do this and take it to child test. Now, other people claim that he did it for theirs, but I'm here to tell you it's a lie. He looked at the stuff Tony and I had done, and he said, take this to child testing. And we did. But right now I'm still classified as a packaging guy, but they never bothered to change that, which was fine with me because I never signed over the rights to He-Man to anybody. And they named him again. They could take credits for the name. They could take credit for the various names. But the fact is, I designed him, and he was my boy. And
Now,
so
when you talk about that, is this tied, or again, did you do that famous Torak one that we've
Yes.
seen in the documentary? That's what you called him originally?
yeah, I did that before I ever went to Mattel. I did that, some versions of it before I ever went to Mattel, because I didn't want, you know what, I had an ego that wouldn't quit, and I didn't want to call him Conan. I didn't want him to be, even any of the other science fiction heroes. I wanted him to be mine. You know, like all of us artists, I had an ego bigger than my skills. But Tony was doing the sculpting. Tony's boss didn't like it. He wanted to work on Barbie. He's a great sculptor. But the fact is, Tony would just, whenever he got the time, would work on He-Man. And we turned out more or less the first figures that you're well aware of. We had the Land Ram and the Wing Raider as sketches. We had a drawing that I'd done of the castle. And so a lady that was running the child test for Mattel named Angie D'Amico, she said, you know what? We've got some boys coming in for boys' toy testing. And frankly, they're not going to make the due date. So they're not going to be ready. Do you want your stuff to go? Well, it wasn't quite ready, but geez, yeah. So I said, sure. So we went in there and we went behind a mirrored wall. There were marketing people there. There was the prelim people there. And there was myself, which was the first time that I know of that a product guy ever got to set into a child test. But I really wasn't a product guy. I was really supposed to be a packaging guy.
All of this came from Torak.
All of it spun off one way or another from Torak. So the kids come in, and I got to tell you, buddy, it would have been wonderful to see it because they came in and they were crazy. They'd been brought in off a 5th grade playground, and they were brought in and they were like insane. They were sweaty. They were hyped up. They were like going crazy. And they came in and we had all the competitive toys that had been gathered for the other test. G.I. Joe, wonderful toys. The first Star Wars, which was our real competition. And all the stuff that was there. And the He-Man stuff was covered up with a black cloth. And the kids come in and the facilitator, the gal from marketing that was supposed to be taking care of them, she explained to the little guys, she said, these are very delicate. They are very, very, you can't damage them. And what I'm going to show you are prototypes. So she pulls back the cover and they went crazy. They went nuts. They grabbed the figures and they were bashing them together. They were trying to they were trying to force the little weapons into their hands and shields and stuff. And they weren't articulated. And they're bashing them together just like Tony and I had imagined when we created the size that they would. So Angie D'Amico called in every group she could down to the 3rd grade, and every group was the same. One kid in the first group, he tried to steal He-Man. He put the figure under his little bomber jacket. Another kid took Skeletor, wrapped him up in his backpack, and another guy decided he was going to take Tila. But when he touched her, my paint on her was still sticky. And so he thought it was some kind of trap. And so he put her right back. But the facilitator divested these guys of their loot and replaced it with Hot Wheels, which did not go over well at all and never did. And the same act was repeated over and over and over till we finally just ran out of kids. Right up to the last group. Yeah, this is probably kids your age, by the way.
Were you able to reuse the same toys, or at some point did some of them have to be replaced because they were damaged?
They all had to be replaced because when we had this kind of success, Angie, the lady that runs the child test, walks up to me and other people were there, but I don't want to mention their names. And so, but she walks up to me and she says, Mark, I think you've got a major hit here. And I went, I think so. It was one of the happiest days of my life. I ran back to Ted, my friend Ted Mayer, who later did the vehicles. And I ran back to him and Tony, and I could hardly wait to tell him. I was so stoked. It was like the biggest high outside of when I first met my wife that I've ever had in my life. I ran down and I couldn't believe that so many people, these little guys, that they were what I was all about, that they were so obvious in their love for this product line. And I loved it too. It came from me. And we went on and presented to the trade. The trade means the people that are going to actually sell them. The Toys R Us.
I want to ask about the development of these. When we saw your drawings, they were more barbarian, and then the vehicles were coming in. And what was the influences in hammering out? Because at the time, as a kid, I had that same reaction. You mentioned the kids going crazy. I'm that kid. I'm that kid. I was at that age. And I didn't know, again, I got into it before the cartoons. I got into it before everything. Right, I remember walking, it's one of those days that changes your life. I remember walking into, it was called the Gibsons, and I saw the toys on the aisle, and I was just fascinated. And what influenced that making of it? Because it was so unique for its time. It wasn't all barbarian, but yet you added these uniques. What came together there?
It was really interesting. It was, at home, he worked on this stuff at home all the time before he even worked at Mattel. And the thing is that nobody cared about it that much. It's like he was like almost outlaw. He was a packaging guy. So he did all his work and then he'd go on to this. So what you see is from the beginning of this He-Man line, those characters, and the fact that it's a barbarian, but yet you have, high-tech vehicles, let's say, or the spacesuit in the castle. It was all because nobody was watching Mark. He was on his own. He was doing it like an outlaw. And so nobody was messing with him till he left. And then people, Mothman, etc. But that's what happened.
Well, I started preaching. The marketing people came down and they were talking to me and they had all these great ideas. I mean, I would have never named it Masters of the Universe. I mean, that did not represent what I was thinking, but it was okay. I didn't want to get into a big hassle, and I didn't, He-Man, frankly, the name He-Man, it seemed like we could have done better, but if that's what they want, to get my product out there, that was fine. I was busy designing weapons and designing figures, and Tony's busy sculpting them. And by the way, I had to do the packaging too. So I had to find somebody who could, in my opinion, I wouldn't settle for anything less than Frank Frazetta, but he was not going to come to work for Mattel. So I found somebody who would take a shot at it and would paint kind of like Frazetta in those washy oil kind of shapes, those kind of mysterious kind of shapes, which went along with my product. But my product was never meant to copy Conan. He's not a thug. He's a person that if you took him to school with you, every bully that picked on you would be sorry. He wouldn't even have to crack heads. He would just show himself, and by being there, you'd know that he could if he wanted to. So
Your artist,
right? Who was that? Yeah, Rudy Obrero did a good job on the packaging, and he did his best, and he was pretty darn good. And when I left, replaced it with somebody, because Rudy would paint in oils, and oils are very hard to deal with because they're sticky, and you can't, the company had a hard time dealing with them, but they looked great. And when they went on the shelf, they kicked ass. They frankly were everything I hoped they'd been. And the guy that was my manager was a really nice guy named Shel Platt. And he was the one that insisted, way back when I went to the first meeting with the president of Mattel, he was the one that insisted that if my product blows, I go. And by insisting with that, I got to see how it started. Yeah, I was doing, so what he did was I did the product, and then he also gave me the packaging, which was not exactly what I wanted, but nobody else could do it with that same kind of feel that Frank Frazetta and all the guys, Bernie Wrights and all the guys that are famous in comic books had made popular. I wanted the kids to realize that this was really theirs. This was really mine and theirs, and didn't have anything to do with what the grown-ups wanted to do. What the grown-ups wanted to do is they talked about quotas, they talked about price point, and they were very concerned about copyrights, etc. And me, I could care less about that. I was into it for them, and yeah, I was channeling. My wife said I was channeling.
Well, let me ask you guys this. I found it interesting because the naming of Masters of the Universe, out of the people we've had, nobody can really say where the name came from. And so part of it, now that I'm thinking, I'm going to ask you, if it was up to you or you had more, what would you have named it? And do you have, can you give me an explanation of how they reached it? Because we know it was Lords of Power at one point.
Yeah.
And then, but, again, what would you have named it and what happened there? How did it get to that name?
Now you have to understand, I'm so close to it now that I don't think of it as anything. I think of it as He-Man. If they would have named it Bernie Schwartz, I would have been happy with Bernie Schwartz. I really didn't care. About this time in my narrative, I'm starting to talk about the castle. I'm talking about this place. It doesn't really exist anywhere. It grows wherever it wants. It's a very organic shape. And I wanted this castle that was all castles you could think of. It was Camelot. It was everywhere you could think of was this going to be this castle. And my hero and Skeletor, who was, yeah, Rebecca calls him her bad son, was the epitome of evil to offset the epitome of good. In other words, he was the guy that he wouldn't play by any rules. His thing was whatever it takes to win, I will do. He-Man played by a lot of rules. So they fought over Castle Grayskull. And Castle Grayskull, I think I had something to do with naming Grayskull, but I don't think anybody understood why. Because about this time, I was doing drawings of Grayskull, and the sculptors would start doing the armature and stuff, and I would look at it and I would go, no, that it was architectural. It was all clean lines and stuff. And I said, no, it has to look almost like it's melting. Actually, it's growing out of the kid's living room floor or out of his yard or somewhere like that. So I did a drawing it for 2 weeks. I built my own armature and I sculpted it myself. And I made it to where it would look good with the figures. It would play with the figures. How could I not? And so Castle Grayskull was done. My friend Ted helped me get a vacuum form off it. And that was the prototype. And that's the one you see now. And I've always been proud of it. Somebody's got me working on part of it now. And the whole thing, when it went together, was really impressive. If you look at the whole presentation, the way it was impressed with the way it was presented with Grayskull, the figures, and all of that stuff. That was my dream. And I finished my dream, and I remember the day it happened. Some marketing guy came in my office and said, okay, you're going to have to take $10 out of it. And I said, why? There's nothing out there like it. The Millennium Falcon isn't like it. Nothing out there like it. And they said, we just decided that we could sell more of them if you take $10 out of it. And they had already taken the walls out of it. My wife had already done the interior tapestries and stuff. And so I remember I came home and I knew that was the end of it because they didn't love it. They just wanted to make money at it. And I'm sorry, wherever they are today, they could deny it, but I was there. I lived through it. And this is what happened. It makes me feel good that the boys and girls, the people that I built it for, that they do love it and they do care about it. Look at how long they've been caring about it.
Well, you guys made something iconic. I mean, we say Castle Grayskull, everybody knows it, even non-fans or, casual people, we say Castle Grayskull, they know what it is.
You know,
Yeah.
I've had students come up to me, and He-Man has been a symbol of of hope, string in penitentiaries, in battles. You wouldn't believe where he's cropped up in jails, in bars. I mean, my God, the bars are uncountable. And of course, Skeletor has cropped up almost as many times. Anytime somebody wants the ultimate badass guy, they drag out Skeletor. And I created him because he came directly from my nightmares.
I wanted to ask because you mentioned Rebecca did the artwork, and the artwork was very unique. And I think for the record and listeners, I do want to cover like how that style came about, especially with the unique tapestries and all that.
Well, it was kind of easy because by then, we'd been married for, I don't know, a few years, but we were together. And I kind of, knew that he was strange, but I didn't know exactly how strange. He showed me the castle. He said, I'd like some tapestry for the castle because they've taken up the inside of the castle. And I said, geez, okay. And he said, I want them to look different than any other label. I said, all right. He says, I want you to use washy colors and make them. At that time, I don't know if they still have what they call Dr. Martin's dye. They were really intense pigments, but kind of like alcohol ink now. And he said, I don't want this. I want you to go in there and just make them washy and let the color run, etc. I thought, oh my God, he's weirder than I thought because I'd done labels for other toys and they were all flat graphics, very flat. He said, I said, what if they don't like, I remember to asking, what if they don't, and he said, who's they? It's me. And I said, because like I said, no one was watching at the time. They didn't take ownership of it yet because they didn't know how fabulous, So so I said, what do you want in there? And he told me, and he said, I remember he said, now I want a space in there with a control panel. And I said, oh, this guy is really crazy. This does not make sense to me. And to this day, it kind of comes out in the book, the story of the spaces, but I still don't really understand all of that. But he was the art director, so I just did what the art director wanted. And that's how those labels came about. And those labels are so famous, it made me famous, honestly. I've seen them as tattoos. I've seen the flags as tattoos. I've seen, well, the grate is really something, the grate with the creeps in it.
Mm-hmm.
The Well of Souls, the carpets, etc. And people write to me a lot and they say, I'm thinking about buying that carpet. And I said, hey, you can't walk on that. You'll fall into the grate. You understand you have to walk around. Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. I said, yeah, you can't just walk on that. So then they get it, But it's like a rug. No, not a rug, maker or something. You walk around it. But it's been really fun. You realize it's over almost 40 years. So 40 years is a long time for this thing to live. And when you guys write to me and you tell me that it's changed your life, etc. And it's not me that did it. It's Mark. It's real. I read to him what you write to me. And it's like it's so compelling that a toy would do this. He changed my life. I just got one yesterday from a bodybuilder who said, I started bodybuilding after I saw him. Oh man, is he built?
Oh, wow.
and it's really, it's really nice. Now I know you guys love the cartoon and all that, and that's after us. Right after that first incentive, the whole start of him, then everybody came. They wanted to know what they say. A dog wants to go on it. They had to put their mark on it. And so right about then, they wouldn't let him go to R&D. He was going to stay a package guy because they didn't want him in R&D because R&D wanted to take credit for the product. That's what happens. No package guy does R&D. So I have to write in the stuff. He tells me, hey, guess what? I got a job at Tomy Toys. You're going to leave Masters? Yeah, it's not mine anymore. I'm going to go. I know you guys love the cartoons and all that, but it's not the real story. I see the King and all. I think the last figure you did was Prince, right?
I get a young He-Man that I never wanted to go with. I didn't want to go any further with it. And I also
Prince Adam.
Prince?
Yeah, and I did a King also. But I told them, don't use it. You'll ruin the line if you use this. It's Disney-like. It was like it lost. I didn't want He-Man. nobody knew where He-Man really came from, and nobody knew for sure where He-Man was going. And that was the idea.
And that's okay. We're thrilled that you guys love the cartoon and all
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
But that's not the real story. And that's Mark.
I wanted to ask about your book, because I understand that Mark is going to tell us what that story is in his book. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. He-Man's father, which is like a thrill. He goes the end of the book, because I'm editing the book. It's really tough, I want to tell you, because I'm not an editor. But anyway, at the end, he's got some stories, who his father is, his mother, and the story. And you go, oh, because this is now the story for over 40 years. This is a story for you now, not for little kids. This is a story for the little kids that tried to steal the stuff that are now. That's what He-Man's story has evolved to. So you guys, I think, are going to be really excited to find out about this. And that doesn't mean you have to throw the other story away, but this has to be a story because it comes from the real guy. You know what I mean? Oh, the name of the book is An Odyssey. He-Man and I, An Odyssey. Beautiful cover done by Ken Coleman. I don't know if you know him.
Yeah, we know Ken.
Yeah, it's a beautiful cover.
Yeah.
And I think you guys are going to really love it as adult He-Man fans,
How soon can we get our hands on it?
As soon as I finish like the last page, and let me tell you something. It's hard because I'm not a writer, and I'm checking a writer's stuff, but not too long from now, I promise.
I don't trust anybody else. I really don't trust them. I made that mistake once in my life. I trusted a lot of people at Mattel. They'd be buddies and everything. Then I find out they were tweaking the names and they were changing stuff, and I found out they'd gone to Filmation. And then they, on my desk one time, this is no kidding, I came to work and they had a whole bunch of the mini comics laid out on my desk, that Alex did. A comic.
Alcala.
Yeah. And I looked at them and they said, would you approve these, please? And I said, well, I got to look at them. I got to read them first. I got to look at the drawing and stuff. And they said, no, we need them right now. I said, I can't do that right now. And so I refused to sign them. And they didn't care. They took them away anyway. And the kids loved them when they put it with the product. And I'm glad they did. But the whole point was we really didn't need them. They were fine, but we really didn't need them. The product was already selling. The castle was the price that they had me do the castle for, including everything, was $29.99, and Toys R Us sold it for $50.
When we were having breakfast, we're sitting having breakfast, and a news comes on. They're talking to each other, and a woman comes on, and she says, I want to talk about He-Man and the Masters. She says, this is the most disgusting thing I've ever seen, kids. This is horrible. Then she went as far as to say, whoever designed this is a loser. And we went, yay, and we high-fived it.
Oh, my goodness.
Well, now this leads to our major characters here. I mean, you talked about the making of He-Man, and Skeletor, I have to say, and people could argue, is probably the most distinct character. And, for our listeners to know that, could you explain how he came about?
Yeah, he came about from a nightmare I had over and over again. And I used to think that if I drew stuff that I could purge myself of it. And he was a attempt to purge myself of evil. This thing would scare me every time I would have a dream with it. And in the book, I tell you exactly where it came from, but I can tell you he was a bad dream. And how appropriate to, I could put my bad dreams down on paper. I feel sorry for people that can't. He-Man was a compilation of characters that was so out of step with what people thought. He-Man was actually, he was more a Zulu warrior than anything else to start with. I mean, he was always muscular and everything, but he was, most of all, he was like, nobody's going to control him. And for sure, nobody's going to bully him. It started off with what kind of guy I'd like to go to school with if I wanted somebody to go to school and protect me. He didn't need pants. His thighs were way too big. He had a muscle. he had a muscle every place that I didn't have a muscle. He had stuff. He wasn't supposed to be, by the way, he wasn't supposed to be blonde. He was supposed to be have brown hair, and it was in a queue to start with, and a little ponytail, and but one of the senior vice presidents of Mattel was a blonde guy. Yeah, and he wanted it to look like him, so he said, "Make it blonde." So they did, and I didn't have anything to do with that. That was because some big shot wanted it.
Oh,
Later,
really quick, what was his original hair color?
it was brown.
Brown. I see.
Yeah, it wasn't black like Conan's. It was brown, like most guys.
The reason why I ask is because there was this action figure in the 80s that looked exactly like He-Man, but he had brown hair, and he didn't come with his armor or his sword or a shield. And a lot of collectors have it in their collection, and they remember it from their childhood, but they don't remember where it came from. It's been a big mystery.
I've never seen it, but good for them. If that's what they want to do, that's fine with me. You know, I mean, whatever it is that makes you happy, that's what you should do. I don't stand on podium or any kind of edifice that everything else is wrong and this is all that was right. It's just that I made it happen. Other people may have known it. They may have had the image somewhere. They may have been thinking about it, but I made it happen. Tony and I made it happen. And he's dead now, bless his heart. But Ted Mayer vehicles, and he helped me with the tooling on the castle. And that was a major event, just doing that.
Could you please tell us a little bit about the ideas that you were able to transfer from the Big Jim toy line? For instance, the designs for Man-E-Faces, Jitsu, Trapjaw, Beastman, his whip, that sort of thing?
Well, I worked on Big Jim when he was Tarzan of the Apes. I did the packaging for him, and I did the product. But none of Big Jim came into He-Man at all. But a little bit of Tarzan did. How could you help but put girls in there? You know, he was one of the great science fiction writers of all time, and Hogarth was a great draftsman, and I'd learned a lot of my drawing lessons from Brune Hogarth. But as far as Big Jim, I didn't like Big Jim. I thought he was stupid. And now some of the other stuff, you know, I mean, you have to realize what the time was like. Kenner was out there with a marvelous line of Star Wars, a great story, okay figures, but very nice looking, a lot of attention to detail, a great vehicle. Star Wars was powerful, and that had already beat Mattel because they offered Star Wars to Mattel, and Mattel turned them down. And Bernie Loomis at Kenner, what he did was there wasn't enough time because Lucas wisely didn't want to tip his hand as what was coming out in Star Wars, so he didn't join forces with any toy company. But Loomis approached him, and he approached him with the idea that you could buy it and then trade it in for a toy. So people could give their certificate for Christmas, and then people could reimburse it for a toy when the toys would finally come out. Now, he had the guts and the energy to do that. This was before He-Man.
Yes, Mr. Taylor. I would like to ask, in the concept designs of the characters that you created, you mentioned earlier that the characters swapped from good in the production, actual concept to actual.
Would you do me a favor? Just call me Mark, please. Everybody knows that's what I am. I didn't hear the last part of your statement. What was the last part of your question? What was the last part of it?
The last part of it, sir, was characters that swapped from the good side to the bad side of the original concept. What could you tell us about?
Zodak, not much. I needed to make, at that time, I was turning out characters so fast that I turned them out so that they could be used either side for good or bad. In fact, Tila, the that was the first sexy male action toy that had ever been done. And that's why the little boys loved her, but the little girls didn't, because she was a babe. And but the whole idea was whether she was going to be good or bad, I left that up to the user, because whether she's going to be on Skeletor's side or He-Man's side, like I thought maybe sometimes she would be on one or the other, and Zodak was the same way. I wanted him to be perhaps sometimes he'd be on the good side, sometimes he'd be on the bad, kind of like a mercenary in Star Wars. He was kind of like that.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, sir, Zodak was intended to kind of be a neutral or a kind of a impartial party that sided both sides of the master.
Sure, isn't that more fun? I mean, He-Man, he was pretty absolute, and Skeletor was definitely absolute. But I wanted it to be so that the kids could play with it in front of their TV set, and you could get your lineup of good guys and lineup of bad guys. But there's liable to be treason involved, if you get my drift.
I had the record set for Point Dread, and I kind of put Zodak with Dread because I kind of viewed him as just kind of an overseer.
Cool. That's perfectly good. You know, I mean, if you like to put him in a role, see, these are all meant to be roles that you will play with. You set it up, and these are going to be. This is like the set to a theater that I tried to develop for you. So it's your story, your imagination. You can play them any way you want. You're the king. You literally, you are the divine being that is assigning these people to their roles. Now, He-Man is pretty much, he's pretty much a good guy. It's hard to make him anything else, and probably you shouldn't. Skeletor's definitely a bad guy. I mean, how can you make him anything but what he is? But all the rest of them, I designed them to be a little bit more vague. The Filmation people, when I saw some of the Filmation things, I didn't even know what the hell they were talking about. There's not supposed to be some comedian little guy floating around in the air. I never designed that.
You know, I'm curious. What's your idea of the story behind Manny Faces?
Manny Faces was one of the last figures I worked real hard on. He was the master of deception. You never know who he was. Am I talking to this person or am I talking to that person? In other words, he could turn on you. And he did, of course. See, that's the story that you would tell using my props.
So I was going to add, one thing I always found fascinating was the weapons. And part of it was that, you know, your idea was from the beginning to put sci-fi weapons with medieval weapons. You know, could you tell me a little bit about what you're thinking for the play for that, since you talked like you focused on play?
This will be more of a apocalyptic world. In other words, we're when you read the book, you'll see what I mean, where Castle Grayskull could exist and where these kind of characters could exist. And some of it maybe would be left over from another time. Some of it would be maybe used in a different type of war. But we'd reached about the bottom of the barrel with He-Man. And he had to take things on pretty much on a muscle basis, as versus some of the other people that had would use leftover high tech. Man at Arms, he was definitely used leftover high tech. My favorite's He-Man, Skeletor, Man at Arms.
You know, out of all of the toys in the Masters of the Universe line, which ones are your favorite and which ones are your least favorite?
Well, I love He-Man because he has the guts to be almost corny. In other words, he has the guts to run around in a little fur-lined jockstrap and sandals and kind of a chest piece on that really doesn't protect him because he doesn't want to be protected. So I have to say I still like He-Man, and I love Skeletor. Well, it started out being a caress. It's what men used to wear when they armored themselves, and it was the chest piece. But it kept getting smaller and smaller because I didn't want him to look like he was afraid of being hurt. So
it was called a harness, and Skeletor has more of a curious, right? Because I always wanted to know, like, what do I call Skeletor's armor? Because it had Romanesque
Yeah.
style to it, and
Well,
so,
see,
well, I was just trying to say, what do I name his armor?
what you name his armor is anything you want. But if you take his armor, take his armor off, I've got one question I want to ask you. Does he fall apart into a pile of bones, or does the armor hold him together, or is the armor to protect him? Protect him from what? What is it that Skeletor needs protection from? But he obviously does, and I get into that more in the book. What Skeletor is never going to defeat He-Man. He-Man is never going to defeat Skeletor. They will battle forever. Their destiny is to battle good against evil forever. And the people that support them, some of them know this more than others. Like Tila, she knows that neither one of these guys is going to win. And she dabbles a little bit in magic. So she has knowledge and she has capabilities that neither one of them choose or can use. And but it's up to you. When you're setting up your little figures there, you should set them up so that you tell the story. You want to know if Skeletor takes off his armor and puts it on a mannequin, let's say, and takes a breather from it, what happens? I don't know. I leave that to you. Wouldn't it be weird if just his head goes sailing across the room and it seems to be anti-gravity? I don't know, and I shouldn't know. That's not an answer. What that is the kind of question that other people that are watching you set up your tableau, your play, they should hear from you. What do you think Skeletor is? If an arrow hits Skeletor and goes right through his body, a spear or an arrow, does it hurt anything? I don't know.
The story in your book that you're writing, all right, will the story include any new characters? And have you considered, just for fun, coming up with new characters?
Of course. But in my book, the main thing is I think you look at the characters a little differently. Instead of the way that Mattel has seen it, I like to think that I put a little more interest in them. For instance, where did Land Ram come from? Where's the Land Ram? All of a sudden, this guy's driving this armored Jeep around. Well, why? Well,
you said Land Ram?
Yeah, Battle Ram. I called it Land Ram.
Oh, okay.
So in the book, he's mainly dealing with characters you know.
Yes.
But even today, somebody asked him, this is a question that's interesting. They said, hey, does what was that guy's name? Battle? What is it?
No.
Ram Man?
No.
Ram Man, right?
Avatar.
No, Ram Man. The guy with the...
Oh, yeah, Ram Man.
Somebody asked him, is Ram Man part of an army or is he stand alone? And Mark said, oh, no. There's Crash Man, Bowling Ball Man, there's Bulldozer Man. And so even as we speak and we don't see those characters live inside his head somewhere. You know what I mean? So they're there. They're just not out, but they're there. They're from the original person. That's the only way I can explain it.
His mind is the well of souls.
When I went back to Mattel, it was about 88, 87, 88. I went back as a senior vice president. So now I got to be a suit, and I thought that would fix everything, but it didn't. And I was there, unfortunately, to watch the end of He-Man, to watch them run it and sell it out. And I couldn't believe they couldn't create a better line and improve the line that existed, but they weren't interested because they wanted to make immediate money. The real fault isn't theirs. The real fault is mine. But I wanted somebody that could make my line happen, and they did that. So I'm very grateful to them because through their own greed, they supported me and let me do my line, and it lived better than I ever thought it would. And the fact that guys like you still think a lot of it, that proves I was right. How much better could it be? It couldn't be better. If I could have done a film, of course I would have done a Pixar-like film. Who wouldn't take any of these opportunities? My opportunity was that they would make this into a male action figure line, which they hadn't been able to do and haven't been able to do since. And my thing is, I was there, and the fact that they loaded all the responsibility on me is not a problem at all. I was glad to accept it. I wanted it. I wanted to do it and make it happen just the way I wanted to make it happen. And that's, just because they stopped making plastic products doesn't mean that there's still not more figures and more stories to tell. I hope you see that there is when you get my book.
Yep.
Mark, I have a question. I was going to ask about basically, what do you think of the Masters of the Multiverse, Keldor, trying to avoid the inevitable multiversal fate, becoming Skeletor? You mentioned earlier he's destined to always be evil and always be power hungry and become what he is. I'm just curious what you think of the thoughts of what they've done with the multiversal coming out.
Nothing. My take on it is they started chipping away at what the whole thing was all about when they started adding that kind of stuff. That's the kind of stuff, the multiverse. Skeletor wouldn't stand anybody trying to take his position away. He's the ultimate in evil. There's nothing you can do to deal with him. He's the ultimate in evil, and he always will be. And he always will be. He always wants to eliminate He-Man. Why? Why does he want to eliminate He-Man? Because He-Man stands for everything Skeletor detests, and that's why.
As again, we're wrapping it up here. I was always curious because when I got your art print, I was always fascinated by the rhinoceros warrior.
That was Rhino Man.
Rhino Man.
Yeah.
I wish he got made. And so I was just wanting to know a little bit information about him. And generally, like I never got to ask you is why didn't he? He's awesome.
Because they got off with doing cheap stuff. Basically, there would be the centerpiece, arms and legs, and a head. The head was actually formed. If you look at the arms and legs, they only did like maybe 3 sets of them of the basic He-Man figure and villain figure. They would make them different colors, but the truth is, they never really wanted to get into it. Like Rhino Man would have meant I wanted it to be like the heavy cavalry. It was wonderful in Pixar when the Pixar planet, when it starts turning on all the mechanized stuff and all those things come out of the jungle. Well, that's what Rhino Man would have done. He didn't ask a lot of questions. He didn't have any real depth. His thing was, I'm gonna bang this thing till it's just so much debris. He could be a good guy. He could be a bad guy. He could be however you want to play with him. He'd be pretty hard to fight because he was armored like crazy.
No.
But you can imagine what Rhino Man would look like if there was an entire army of them. Then that would have been like the heavy cavalry. It would have been great. I didn't get tired of the He-Man line. Mattel did. They got tired of playing the game. Yeah, they wanted to get silly. People made promises to them, and they bit on them. And they tried to tell too much so they could make money on the product. And again, I'm not bitter about them because they let me do what I wanted to do, but they sold out way too soon.
Well, part of it, I know you don't like the later line, and a lot of people that we've spoken to said it got crazy, it's, toward the end. And so part of it is that I wanted to know if the line went more your way, what would it have looked like? What would Mark Taylor's, Master Universe line would have continued if you went beyond?
That is a wonderful.
Well, I give you a hint in the book. It wouldn't be silly. It'd be something I think that every man that was a boy aspires to, and that is might will be right. I mean, right will win, but it's a hard fight, and it's hard to keep your principles, and that's what it would really be about. And it doesn't mean it's not a toy line. I proved that you can do a toy line that believes in these things, and I put out the product to show that you can do a toy line. And so far the movies have been a joke. They're laughable. They don't even want to even with something that's a sure thing, they don't want to spend the money on it because they think He-Man is silly. And if you think He-Man is silly, then you're starting with a bad premise because He-Man isn't silly. He-Man is the little boy in every one of us. The little boy that's tired of being bullied, the man who everybody thinks they can tell what to do, who doesn't have any rights. He's the spokesman for the underdog, and he always will be, because that's where he is in my heart and in my mind. He always will be that. And if I got any of that across to you, and if you enjoyed it, then I succeeded in what I've tried. As far as Mattel was concerned, they don't discuss these kind of things. They discuss stories, they discuss job titles, and they discuss stuff like that. A guy like me doesn't belong in a place like that. And I knew that when I left. I did the Turtles, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I did those for Playmates, for Bill Carson and Playmates. And I went there and I basically took the same idea, only the Turtles are a love story. As long as they stay together, they can beat anybody. If you separate them, they become vulnerable. That's the whole idea of Turtles. And when I went there, I met with Eastman and Laird, and I laid out how I would like to do the Turtles, and that was good enough. And they're still done that way to this day.
Well, that leads to a follow-up question that we were going to have, is that we know you left for Turtles. For our listeners, what did you work on in Turtles? Cause
I worked on Raphael, Michelangelo, Leonardo, Donatello. I worked on Splinter. I worked on the first party van, and I worked on the big blimp, which hardly anybody sees anymore. I worked on Bebop, and I invented Bebop. I did the first drawing of Bebop and Rocksteady. Those were the second generation. But yeah, I don't know who would have started it. There was nothing there but a stack of drawings that nobody wanted, and I did my own B sheets, my own drawings.
well, we're coming up on the hour, and my last question was just a little curiosity because I know Rebecca drew the spaceman in the Castle Grayskull. Could you tell us a little bit about that? Because that was my fascination. Honestly, this is my personal question, because as a kid, I stared at that spaceman for a long time, when I had Castle Grayskull, and I always imagined it.
Yeah. Well, she did a good job, didn't she?
Yeah.
Yeah. People keep those labels. We see the artwork all the time. It's quite amazing. Man, see, that does the thing that I'm talking about with the whole line. It tickles your curiosity and makes you want to tell a story. Who the heck is a spaceman? Is it really a spaceman, or is it just a suit? And if so, why is it hanging up? That's the kind of stuff that I wanted the kids to get into with me. I wanted them to get into that whole thing. And so did Rebecca. And Rebecca knew not to give too much information, but just give some information. And we hope that works. Giving all that's boring. That's what they get in the way they teach school and what they get in really boring books. They don't want to do that. They want to take it and they want to run a little bit with themselves. I'm sure you do too. So what you have to say, what you feel about the spaceman is what it is.
Mark and Rebecca, I just would like to say thank you so much for creating my childhood and my obsession, my fun, my joy, my collection. I love everything y'all have done. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, buddy.
Thrills us to no end to think that you still have life, that you have life this thing. I mean, I can't tell you, because Mark doesn't get on social media. I can't tell you how many people just cling to this thing. And it really feels good. I mean, it's 40 years almost. And the fact that you still love it is that's like a gift that keeps on giving, let me tell you. It's just a wonderful thing. The things I hear are like, oh, you childhood, or my prison sentence was better because it's unbelievable. The story. I can't even tell you all. I was in a submarine and I had He-Man. Stories are incredible. And that is like such a thrill. And you guys give me credit for this. And I'm I'm the wingman, all this comes out of Mark's gourd, out of his head. It's just amazing. And I thank you. I thank you very much.
Well, I can tell you this, being married to a wonderful woman, and I can tell you that we succeed because we have great wives with us. I know talking to you guys, Mark appreciates you, and we see what you've done, and we're grateful for you. And, we're here. And I don't think, again, I don't want to speak for Mark, but I think Mark is here because of you too.
Yeah, that's true.
One of the things I want to say as we end this is that I know I've told you guys this before, but it has to be said that everything we have, as grateful and thanking us as you do, we have to double thank you because we're here because of you. This is because of you. He-Man.org exists because of you. PowerCon exists because of you. Our toy collections exist. My poor bank account exists because of you.
Well, sorry about that part.
Yeah.
I understand we're old now. We have you guys calling us and writing to us. And the fact that somebody's brain fart, let me put it that way, someone's brain fart to fruition and became something that you guys hold dearly. And when you guys say that to us, there's other people that have tried to take credit for it. You can just listen to Mark and know where he's gotten the ideas. And the other person that says this doesn't have a clue. And that this comes from Mark. And it's a thrill, and I'm so much. It's a thrill to have you be a fan.
She said it all, as usual.
Yeah, you guys were that thrilled with the storylines and all that. But, like you said, it's our imaginations. And that's what the toy is to me. I enjoyed the cartoons. I enjoyed the comic books, but it was me playing with it.
Of course, and as you should. And that's exactly right. And that's why I take joy in what everybody does, is because they're taking it and they're running with it. And that's what it was meant for. In fact, I remember when I presented it to the president of Mattel, and I said, kids don't have a place to play outside anymore. They have to play in the house. And so I want this thing to be something that they can play with, the castle to grow out of the floor, for them to be able to play with it in the room or in front of the TV set. I didn't even know there was going to be a TV program, but that shows you how open I was even at that time. And I'm even more open now. And I love what the collectors are doing. When the collectors take it and they put something of themselves into it, I don't have a problem with that. I think that's marvelous. Do it. Do whatever you want to do. Have fun with it. That's what it's all about, isn't it? Have some fun with it. Yeah.
And I think we're in for resurgence because, they have the Netflix cartoons coming, 2 cartoons coming, a movie maybe, and toys, coming back. So hopefully we get more fan base and a next generation will come along and love it as much as we did.
Great. It sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Sounds great. And you guys take care of yourselves, will you?
Hopefully, again, our paths will run again and again and again. I mean, I do look forward to seeing you guys.
You've got the power, buddy.
Thank you. That actually makes me feel so awesome hearing them say that.
Also this week that came out was some sad news for the community. San Diego Comic-Con will not be happening this year. For the first time in 50 years, the organizers have decided to cancel. Currently, San Diego Convention Center is being used for COVID-19 patients, and they feel that they cannot guarantee everyone's safety, and that is one of the reasons why they canceled it. Any thoughts, guys, on this decision? I know I expected it, but it's still very sad.
Well, I really hope that we get a look at what Mattel's been cooking up for the show in terms of exclusives and reveals. I would hope that we'll be able to get our hands on those Comic-Con exclusives at some point in some fashion.
Well, I found it weird that Mattel hasn't even announced. By now, they would have announced, even before all this, there would have been hints of San Diego Comic-Con exclusives. And so right now, I'm not feeling it because I know one way or the other that they worked their way through it, or they might even be thinking, well, we'll just sit on it for a year and save us some trouble. So anything right now is possible. Then, nobody has spoken. Everybody's just waiting. And honestly, that's how I am here at my house. I think that's how all of us in this world is right now. We're just waiting.
Yeah, I have a feeling the major toy companies took the cue when they canceled WonderCon to put all the exclusives on the back burner, because we would have been getting those hints now about the exclusives, since WonderCon would have been, I believe, last weekend or the weekend before. And I know they did a virtual con for WonderCon, but the only exclusives that I've seen so far from there were Funko, which they were doing on their website.
I was a bit disappointed about hearing about San Diego Comic-Con and not hearing them doing it virtual. I was kind of surprised they actually haven't announced them doing a virtual one.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, they could always tease it out bit by bit, like they have for the Origins line on the official Masters of the Universe Facebook page. They could just keep doing that, like, once a week or once every other week, giving us little tastes all the way up to fall when Origins is supposed to be released to store shelves.
So it's a wait and see.
Well, unfortunately, I hate that I have to maybe think about a time where we're like, hey guys, remember when we had Comic-Cons? It's just,
Oh, God.
And a ready supply of toilet paper?
Yeah. But I know things will get better. I know things will move. We will weather this. And I look forward to, or again, I think everything's going to go crazy once things normalize, and we'll all go on vacations, and, we'll all go out. Restaurants will be packed to the rim because nobody wants to eat at home for the next 2 years. And, the crazy things, and people will be shopping all the time at the malls. Might make a comeback at this point. But, I know that eventually it will get better. And, we had this tragic events, and, there was a few times in history where things got knocked out of order for our traditions, but we always bounce back. And, if we don't have this Comic-Con, or even, God forbid, we don't have this PowerCon, there'll always be next year, and we'll have fun then. We won't, this year we'll be quiet about it, but next year, we go crazy,
I would like to thank Mark and Rebecca Taylor for joining us today. And as always, for the up-to-the-minute news on anything Masters of the Universe related or PowerCon related, check out He-Man.org. And until next time, good journey.
This is Renee. I'd like to thank you all for listening. Nerds on the Couch is always posting up the latest nerd news to follow us on our Facebook page. And once again, it was super awesome having Mark and Rebecca Taylor with us. They are the most awesome people in the fandom on this world, and I'm just so glad I got to have them. So subscribe to Council of the First Ones wherever you get podcasts, and good journey.
This is David Clark, owner of AdultCollector.org. I had so much fun, hearing all the great information and insights Mark and Rebecca gave to us. I'm so happy I'm able to be a part of this. And I wanted to urge everybody to visit the Facebook page for the Masters of the Universe, The Age of Wondar mini-comic series. Good journey.
And this is Sean. And I wanted to thank Mark and Rebecca Taylor for coming on the show tonight. That was an amazing interview to listen to. And good journey, everybody.
This is Rex, and I wanted to thank Mark and Rebecca Taylor for coming on the show tonight. It was amazing to get to interview y'all, and good journey, everyone.
This has been a Nerds on the Couch production in association with AdultCollector.org. Episode do not reflect the opinion